I was directed to a video from Prager University asking non-believers their thoughts about good and evil. Let's take a look.
Do you believe that good and evil exist?
Not as tangible physical things, but actions can be defined as good or evil. In my view, actions that help people are good, and actions that harm people with no corresponding good are bad. Evil, to me, would be any actions that do massive harm without any redeeming or corresponding good to come out of it.
The answer to this question separates Judeo-Christian values from secular values. Let me offer the clearest possible example: murder. Is murder wrong? Is it evil? Nearly everyone would answer yes.
Interesting that you would say most people would answer yes, meaning there would be some who would say it's not wrong. Almost as if different people have different ideas as to what morality is. You could almost say that morality is subjective and varies from person to person.
But now I will pose a much harder question. How do you know? I'm sure you think murder is wrong, but how do you know?
Well, I follow the harm principle. Killing somebody who doesn't want to be killed is, by definition, harming them and rarely does any social good. So, following the moral edicts that I live my life by, killing, in general, is bad. I'm sure many people can think of a scenario where killing may be necessary to prevent a worse event. For example, stopping someone just before they're about to harm somebody else.
If I asked you how you know that the Earth is round, you would show me photographs from outer space or offer me measurable data. But what photographs could you show? What measurements could you provide that prove that murder or rape or theft is wrong? The fact is, you can't.
No, you can't. The difference is that the shape of the Earth is an objective fact, while what someone believes is right or wrong is subjective. There are people out there who think that harming others is all right. Fortunately, they're in the minority, and as a society, we have put into place a system of laws that try to prevent people who have no moral compunction against harming others, including murder.
There are scientific facts, but without God, there are no moral facts. In a secular world, there can only be opinions about morality. They may be personal opinions or society's opinions, but only opinions.
Exactly. Morality, what people view as right or wrong, are only personal opinions. There aren't any moral molecules out there, and you won't find any atoms that make up good or evil.
Take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder, and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy.
We are alone in a cold and uncaring universe with no morality built into it. That's why it's up to us to be moral beings. Morality isn't going to come from anywhere else, so if we want it, it has to come from us.
Every atheist philosopher I have read or debated on this subject has acknowledged that if there is no God, there is no objective morality.
Okay, to go back to your earlier point, to prove the Earth is round, we can show several things, like photographs from space, the change in the length of shadows at various distances from the equator, or the simple fact that it's been circumnavigated. What exactly do you have to show that a God, not even specifically yours, but any divine being, exists? If you can't show that God exists, and, as you said, if there's no God, there's no objective morality, then what evidence do you have that there is any objective morality? Besides, of course, your desire that there's some objective moral standard, and what we simply want rarely translates to the real world.
Judeo-Christian values are predicated on the existence of a God of morality. In other words, only if there is a God who says murder is murder wrong. Otherwise, all morality is opinion. The entire Western world, what we call Western civilization, is based on this understanding.
I see that you don't feel that you have to think for yourself. I choose to understand why I take the stances I do. I think unjustified killing is wrong because it harms people. You say it's wrong because you're told that it's wrong. This brings up another argument. How do you know God is good? According to your mythology,
let me let you in on a little inside info. God hates it when it's referred to as mythology.
Sorry, theology. God has determined how people should behave, so how do you know God is good? Are actions good because God tells you to do them? Or does he tell you to do them because they are good? Is God itself good? And more importantly, how do you know that? Are all actions it deems bad the same? Is taking somebody's life equivalent to working the Sabbath? In the Bible, both are considered equivalently bad. So, are you suggesting that we should go back to the practice of executing people for trying to stay warm on that day of the week? Society has come to the decision, independently of the Bible, that such a course of action is wrong.
Now, let me make two things clear. First, this doesn't mean that if you don't believe in God, you can't be a good person. There are plenty of kind and moral individuals who don't believe in God and Judeo-Christian values. But the existence of these good people has nothing to do with the question of whether good and evil really exist if there is no God.
That's true, but the knife cuts both ways. Having good atheists doesn't say anything about the non-existence of God, but good theists don't say anything about its existence either. As much as you want there to be a God to give an objective morality, there isn't any evidence of one. So that means there was no evidence of an objective morality either.
Second, there have been plenty of people who believed in God who were not good people. Indeed, more than a few have been evil and have even committed evil in God's name. The existence of God doesn't ensure people will do good. I wish it did.
Wow, it's almost as if you're saying that different people have different understandings of God, all with no presentable evidence. Almost, you would say, making it a subjective view. So without evidence, even accepting who or what God is subjective. So how can you say that one exists? And, following that any objective morality dependent on one exists? If there was an objective good, then everybody would have to accept that. This is the thing about humanity. People do what they think is right. Those acts of evil committed in God's name that you brought up, they were done by people thinking they were doing the right thing, following the beliefs they had. If what was good was objective, then what everybody would think of as good would be the exact same thing, and any atrocities would never happen. The sad thing is that morality really is subjective, and some people will do what the majority thinks are horrible things, and think they're in the right. Gravity is objective and pulls all objects together in the same way. If morality was objective, it would affect all people in the same way as well.
The existence of God only ensures that good and evil objectively exist and are not merely opinions.
But your belief in the existence of a God itself is merely an opinion. Therefore, your belief in an objective right or wrong is also merely an opinion. I do wish there was some kind of objective moral standard that we could measure against. One of my viewers once said there are actions that are objectively wrong, like slavery or female genital mutilation, but sadly, there is nothing built into the universe that says they are wrong. I do wish there was some kind of objective morality that we could point to and say, this or that action is wrong, but there isn't, and that's why we need to figure out what is moral. That's why I rely on what causes or relieves harm to determine what I find is right or wrong.
Without God, we therefore end up with what is known as moral relativism, meaning that morality is not absolute, but only relative to the individual or to the society. Without God, the words good and evil are just another way of saying I like and I don't like. If there is no God, the statement murder is evil is the same as the statement I don't like murder.
No, to me the statement murder is evil is roughly equivalent to there is almost no justification for the harm done in the deliberate unlawful taking of another person's life, so therefore should not be allowed. But that's kind of a mouthful, so I just shorthand it to evil. Human beings have evolved empathy. As social creatures, we depend upon each other to survive and thrive. Societies that evolved a sense of empathy towards those within their group ended up doing better than those where everybody was simply looking out for number one and freely robbed and killed each other. Yes, we can get individuals who do only care about themselves, but they thankfully appear to be outnumbered by those who do have a sense of social empathy, and put systems of laws into place to protect people from those who do not care about harming others.
Now, many will argue that you don't need moral absolutes. People won't murder because they don't want to be murdered. But that argument is just wishful thinking. Hitler, Stalin, and Mao didn't want to be murdered, but that hardly stopped them from murdering about 100 million people.
People like Hitler, Stalin, and Mao did not have empathy for the people they exterminated in their desire for power. That's why a series of checks and balances are needed for those in power to keep them from harming the people under their power.
It is also not a coincidence that the first societies in the world to abolish slavery, an institution that existed in every known society in human history, were Western societies rooted in Judeo-Christian values. And so were the first societies to affirm universal human rights, to emancipate women, and to proclaim the value of liberty. Today, the rejection of Judeo-Christian values and moral absolutes has led to a world of moral confusion.
If it was true that these things, ending slavery and the emancipation of women, were the result of Judeo-Christian values, why did they persist so long after the founding of Judeo-Christian beliefs? If it was a moral absolute that they were wrong, wouldn't followers at the time of Christ, if not the Israelites before, immediately end these practices? It took almost 2 millennia for these changes to begin to occur. You would think it would not take nearly as long if it was a moral absolute, and not simply a change of society over time. And you cannot claim that Christianity abolished slavery when it was also Christians that also fought for its continuation. You can say that Christians ended slavery, but it was Christians that also tried to preserve it, using the Bible to justify that slavery, removing your argument for it being an absolute moral stance. Finally, if the rejection of moral absolutes and Judeo-Christian values has led to moral confusion, as you put it, why is it that many societies in the Western world are rejecting theism while at the same time their murder rate is going down? If you are right, and rejection of Judeo-Christian values and moral absolutes has led to a world of moral confusion, then you would expect that the countries rejecting your values would have the highest murder rates, not the lowest. I know that you begrudgingly admitted that some people can be good without God, and some believers can do bad things, but the statistics show that as people let go of their belief in a supreme deity, what would be considered evil is reducing.
In the New York Times in March 2015, a professor of philosophy confirmed this. He wrote, "What would you say if you found out that our public schools were teaching children that it is not true that it's wrong to kill people for fun? Would you be surprised? I was."
I found the article that you were talking about. Yes, public schools try to show kids the difference between what is a fact and what is an opinion, which is something that students should know. Just because you hold something to be true doesn't make it a fact.
Oh no, these facts and opinions look so similar.
Don't worry about it. Happens all the time.
The author uses the example of George Washington being the first president as both a fact and an opinion. But it's not an opinion if it's verifiably true, no matter what someone's feelings about the subject are. If an opinion is proven to be true, then it's a fact. There are no facts to say that murder, in itself, is wrong. But fortunately, the majority holds the opinion that it is, enough so to put laws into place to stop those who are of the opinion that killing is acceptable, or at least have them held accountable for their actions. Oh, and as a side note, the school never said that it isn't wrong to kill people for fun. That was just an anal retrieval from the article's author.
So then, whatever you believe about God or religion, here is a fact. Without a God who is the source of morality, morality is just a matter of opinion. So, if you want a good world, the death of Judeo-Christian values should frighten you.
Okay, you're arguing the consequences, not the facts. You want there to be an objective morality, and feel the only way for there to be such a thing is for a God to exist. But, as much as anybody wants something to exist, that doesn't mean that it will. And as I mentioned in an earlier point, with less theistic societies in the Western world being less violent when compared to the more theistic ones, along with higher levels of happiness and altruism, the facts would make the, as you put it, death of Judeo-Christian values appear, at least in a measurable sense, to be a good thing.